things about RCU is it's quite low level. And for some reason, it seems to be important that it be doing something. And so one of the things is, of course, the safety properties. And it turns out I spent most of last year dealing with the fact that a very critical RCU safety property is, in fact, ease of use. All right, so there's some things I'll be going through. I won't dwell on that at the moment. But I'm going to give a very quick overview of RCU. I'm just going to tell you what you need to know for the rest of the talk. The paper has a longer introductory section with a lot of citations, so we'll start here. One is that RCU is specialized. It's not trying to be all things to all people. Its primary use is read mostly linked list. It has other use cases, that's the big one. And it works best. It's most easiest to use and most effective if you have a lot of reads, fairly few updates, and if you're in a situation where getting data a little bit out of date is not a problem. For networking, for example, if you get the routing table from a millisecond ago, whatever. But it can be used in other areas. It just is a little more harder to use and a little more complicated. I'm looking at a deep core API of 3 members. I'll introduce 2 other members a little bit later. There's a lot of members. There's a URL at the bottom of the slide here that lets you go through an Eleving article going through all of them. First off, we have readers. Readers start with RC read lock. They end with RC read unlock. You can nest them. Okay? Kind of like a read-write lock. This is the read side. Acts similarly. The update side is a little bit different. We have something called Synchronize RCU. It waits for pre-existing RCU readers to complete. And these guys wait for nobody. No matter what happens, you do RC read lock, you're there. Nobody can stop you. Nobody can tell you're there. This has to wait for just the pre-existing ones. Also look at it graphically. That may be a little easier. So time's going this way, and we have 4 scenarios we're going through. The first 3 are legal. The last one is not. If we have a reader that was existence at the update, let's say we remove something from a linked list. This guy might have a reference to it. And that means we need to wait for this guy to get done, let go of his reference, so that we can do something destructive afterwards. On the other hand, if we started before the reader did, well, he can't possibly have a reference because we got rid of it before he started. And so if he lasts longer than we do, no problem. And of course, if Synchronize RCU completely covers the thing, we're golden in both ways. First off, he can't have a reference to the thing. And secondly, he's not around when we do something destructive anyway. So, great, right? However, the other way around, where the reader totally spans the Synchronize RCU is really bad. This guy might have a reference, and he might be still using it when we free it. This has rather severe negative actuarially consequences on your kernel. Don't do that. This would be a bug in RCU. All right, so that's kind of the way it relates. It turns out that there's a very small toy RCU implementation. In fact, this is implemented RCU torture. We can run tests on this in Linux-kernel. It works correctly. I'm going to give a sneak preview. My spec, RCU specification, I call it empirical. I learn about RCU's requirements as I go along. The formal verification guys prefer me to say that I have an incomplete spec. But either way you look at it, I learned about this part yesterday. I sent a patch out to this effect at 1 a.m. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, I'm kind of annoyed about this. I really didn't like to have to do this because one of the really nice things about RCU is that the readers can potentially execute exactly the same sequence of machine instructions as you'd use for a single-threaded implementation of the linked traversal. And that's still the case, but we're suppressing some compiler optimizations. It's a little bit less probable. In any case, these basically do nothing. This is an as invulnerable, but there's no instruction there. All we do is prevent memory from going there, from going back and forth, references being optimized back and forth. This is one of the ones I referred to, these 2 guys, and they're just for publishing and subscribing to linked data. And this is Synchronize RCU, all of it right there. We just go on every online CPU, it's an iterator over online CPUs, and we force ourselves to run on that CPU. This is specialized for non-preemptible Linux kernels. All right? And the trick is, if you're using a reader-writer lock in a non-preemptible kernel, you're not allowed to block, not allowed to voluntarily give up the CPU if you're in there holding the reader-writer lock. If you violate that rule, you can deadlock. We enforce the same rule for RCU. Fair is fair, right? That means that if I schedule on a CPU, I forced a context switch to happen on a CPU, and if the reader's following the rules, which they better be, just as with spin locks, then all of the previous readers have to be done. Because readers are not allowed to block, this is a non-preemptive environment, you'll run to completion, run to a voluntary yield. So if we're able to run on the CPU, all the readers beforehand have voluntarily yield, they're done. Once we get that on all the CPUs, all the old readers are gone, and we can go ahead and do the destructive part of the update. Okay, so 11 lines of code right there. That's pretty small and simple and straightforward. But if you've looked at the Linux kernel, you may notice that the RCU implementation is somewhat larger than 11 lines. And these are some of the reasons. Each of them is worth a few hundred lines of code, but we're not going to go through those. Instead, let's take a more graphical view of it. This is 11 lines of code. Your elegant little synchronization primitive. It's cute. It's wonderful. Who couldn't love it? Unfortunately, the lifetime of this thing in the Linux kernel is kind of short. In the Linux kernel, this is equipped to survive the Linux kernel. I mean, it's not quite as cute and cuddly, but it can survive, all right? So my job in the Linux kernel is to be the polar bear, or at least to make RCU be the polar bear. All right. So one thing we are going to look at, this complication, there's multiple flavors of RCU. This is tied in directly to the security vulnerability. And we talked about this API set. There are two others. I'm not going to go into them in detail. This is for code that's subject to networking denial of service attacks. And this is for things that have to interact with non-preemptive, non-real-time issues, waiting for an interrupt handler to complete or something like that. And caution. It's really cool. There's been some RCU papers. A couple of years ago, I had the privilege of sitting in the audience for 2 RCU talks at a C++ conference, which was a surprise, but a pleasant one. But we've been using RCU in production for 25 years. We haven't been sitting on our rear ends, not doing anything during that time. So there's a lot of texture, and there's a lot of prior art and things we do with it, both in the implementations and the uses. And it's kind of natural that people will cite a paper without reading it. And go ahead. I'm happy to give you a post-publication review if needed. Okay? But I'm not going to guarantee it's not going to be embarrassing. Sorry. Okay? So I would recommend you take a look at what we've done. But nonetheless, despite all that, the slides I've shown in these few minutes give you a rough idea of what you need to know for the rest of the presentation. I certainly encourage you to learn more, but we're doing here. Now, one question is, why the heck would RCU be involved in security exploit? I mean, it's really low level, way down at the bottom of the kernel, and there's all sorts of other attractive things to exploit way above it, so what the heck? And I actually would have agreed with this viewpoint some years ago. But then this thing called Rowhammer showed up. We've been really worried in the last few years about these side channel attacks that allow you to pull information that you aren't supposed to get out of the kernel or elsewhere. This allows you to change information you're not supposed to have access to, all right? And it's attacking the dynamic RAM. If they can attack the dynamic RAM, they can attack me. RCU is, higher in the stack than the dynamic RAM. So for many years, this was a theoretical possibility I was aware of. But I was February of 2018. I was sitting in my cube minding my own business, and I got this email. Now, I'm not going to go through this email in detail, but it's from Linus Torvalds. It's cc security@kernel.org. It does not cc LKML or any other public email list. If you get an email like this as a Linux kernel developer or maintainer, this is a sign you're not going to be minding your own business for some period of time. In my case, most of last year. And the problem was a misuse of RCU. I could claim, I'm golden, I did the right thing, I did what I said I did, and they messed up and misused me, but Leanness, to his credit, recognized that this situation with these three different flavors was kind of an attractive nuisance. It was an invitation for people to misuse things, and so, Paul, is there really no way out of this mess? And that's the subject of this talk, or the remainder of it anyway. Okay, what was the real problem? Well, they had a reader. The reader said RCU read lock scan. Yeah. It traversed RCU protected linked data structure. Good. It said RCU read unlock scan. Good. All right. Yeah, there we are. The updater was, removed some old data, did a synchronize RCU, and it freed the old data. Anybody tell me what the problem with that is?
You need to synchronize RCU sketch. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. You're supposed, if you use one flavor on one side, you're supposed to use the same flavor on the other side. You got it right. And mixing flavors like that is kind of about as healthy for your kernel as acquiring the wrong lock or accessing the wrong variable or calling the wrong function or any number of other mistakes you can make. It's not a good thing. Let's go detail what happens here a little bit. So we've got this linked list. The updater wants to remove B from it. And at the same time the reader is traversing the list, the updater has no way to affect the execution of the reader, really. The updater has to put up with it. So the reader is RCU lock scad. It goes through an iterator through the list, and it gets to L and B and drops out. So it's got a hold of L and B here. About that time, the updater says, hey, we're removing from the list. So it updates A's pointer to point to C. B still has an X pointer, so the reader can still continue on the list. It's going to be fine. Does the synchronize RCU to wait for all the old readers? And so what that means is going to ask everybody, do you have an RCU read lock in effect? This guy says, well, I got this RCU read lock scad, but that's not RCU read lock, so yeah, go for it. Go wild. Which it does, K-free, and use after free is just as bad in RCUs as anywhere else. It's not a good thing. So what are developers supposed to do instead? Well, the gentleman there gave us the clue. One approach is to change the reader. If you're going to use synchronize RCU, use the matching RCU read lock and RCU read unlock, in which case, when synchronize RCU says, are there any of these RCU read locks in effect? It says yes. And so it waits until he's done, and you do K-free. There's no use after free because the guy's done using it. Or the other way around, you can adjust the updater to match the readers. Either way works. Okay, so you have to have consistency, as shown here. But that's a problem. When I was a kid, there was a cartoon called Analogic, and one instance of this cartoon shows this great ape. And the great ape is chastising its great ape child. To err is human! Stop being human! Unfortunately, well, we're all human. I do have RCU torture to be human on my behalf to find my bugs, but still, this is a problem. Okay, this is inviting misuse. We'd like something like that. I mean, it'd be kind of cool if you just say synchronize RCU and have it match everything. That way you couldn't possibly choose the wrong update thing because there's only one of them. All right? Of course, life never is quite that simple because there's all sorts of sort of semi-synonyms for these guys. It's a little bit hairy, but hey, we're supposed to be the polar bear here. We have to deal with this stuff. All right, so one straightforward way to deal with it, this is, correct by construction, wonderful and everything, is you take these synonyms. I just picked a particular synonym, preempt enable and preempt disable, synonym for RCU read lock scad, RCU read unlock scad. And you put an RCU read lock at the end of it. So you do your preempt disable stuff, you invoke RCU read lock, and on the other side you invoke RCU read unlock, and then you got all the stuff you need, and you just do your synchronize RCU, and life is wonderful. Correct by construction, great stuff. Unfortunately, its correctness does not extend to the Linux kernel running on real hardware. Why is that? Well, you see, the Linux kernel has hand-coded assembly language that sometimes change the states of interrupts and of preemption, and the hardware will do it too. Now, I could invoke RCU read lock and RCU read unlock in assembly language in 20 some odd different CPU families, but I'd rather not. And I don't think that all the processor manufacturers are going to be very happy about my insisting that they, hard code RCU primitives into their interrupt, enable, and disable transitions everywhere. So forget it, this doesn't work. That didn't work either, and that didn't either, all right? Now this generated like 8 pages of handwritten code before I realized I was making a mess. And then I realized I could change things. I don't have time to go through this in detail, so we'll just kind of fly along here. And what this is just kind of pseudocode of RCU's operation, a piece of it. These bold italicized pieces, this piece and this last bullet, are what I had to change to make this work. So as a fraction of the total, it's not large. This is a fairly confined thing. I verified it solved the problem, and this is half of 3 pages of code to make it work. Okay, you know, we're 5 pages and up to 8 pages. Now we're down to 3. Now we're talking. This might be something useful. Okay, this is the total number of commits to implement it, which is nice, except, of course, there was some preparatory and cleanup work, which totaled more than 200 commits. But, you know, you got to be the polar bear sometimes, and this is part of it. Of course, we're saved by community process, zero-day test robot. Intel runs that. It's really helpful, and they found a bunch of problems that I fixed. Joel Fernandez did a bunch of review, which was helpful. So the question here is, what effect does this have on RCU's reliability? Obviously, we had bugs. RCU Torture says it's more reliable. But, and I made RCU Torture nastier, but, you know, who knows, right? It did introduce some bugs. One way is to do an estimate based on age of the code. The older the code, it might be more reliable. That's a heuristic, but a useful one. And a couple of years ago, we were at 4 years median age of line of code. So half the lines of code were older than 4 years, half younger. And as of 5.0, we were below 3. A 30% decrease, which might be some reason for concern. If you kind of stand back and take a longer-term view, it doesn't look quite as bad. In 2011, the median age was like 1.6 years, so we're almost double that. But there's still probably some bugs to find. We could look at the experience in 2018 of old bugs cropping up, and a third of them were some changes in 2017, so that might give me some. Of course, this is not statistically significant. So drawing conclusions to this is dubious. On the other hand, I'm here to tell you, you do not want to live in a world where the number of RCU bugs is statistically significant, okay? I'm sorry if that messes your statistics up. Live with it. Okay, so expectations, we're probably going to find forward progress bugs, at least another 3 RCU bugs, some consolidation bugs, and the usual influx of bugs I don't expect because they're from old code, because Murphy never sleeps. But this is kind of a reactive posture. I'm waiting for bugs to show up. That's kind of ridiculous. I'd like to be more proactive. You know, we just had this happen. The ages drop. I've ejected a bunch of bugs somehow. I don't know where they are yet. Can I do something now to find them instead of waiting for them to appear? Could I add formal verification to RCU's regression test suite? Let's go out there and use the power of formal verification to just find these bugs, all right? Well, this has actually been done. There are 3 different groups using 2 tools. I'm not going to go through in detail. 2 groups use a SAT solver-based thing. Another group used partial order reduction, a couple tools. But how'd this work? The papers are there. The slides will be available. You have to configure RCU down to a minimal code size. So if you're using these tools, you're not doing CPU hot plug, there's no idle loop, no preemption, no call, there's not a lot of things, okay? They just kind of squeezed it down to minimal size so it kind of fit in their tool. The idea is you take portions of RCU code and stick in this test harness and then run the tool on it. The cool thing about this is these tools, I kid you not, these tools take live Linux kernel C code and take it in and do something with it. If you told me 10 years ago that would happen, I would have laughed in your face, but they do it, okay? And they're just plenty fine with non-linearizable algorithms. They take straight stuff, and they also do memory models, weakish memory models. And, you know, if you tell me, Paul, I just proved your code correct, I'm saying, yeah, sure you did. There's a Git tree over there. It's got branches. Try it on those and tell me what you find. And if you find all the bugs, I might believe you, maybe. And they did find the injected bugs, which is cool. You know, even formal verification tools need to be validated. All right. Now, the thing is, they didn't find any bugs I didn't already know about. And I need you to tell me the bugs I don't know about. The ones I already know about, thank you. You know, that's not proactive. So that challenge is still open. There's a place you can look at it. There's been impressive progress, but there's some requirements that I don't think the formal verification communities, and we're out of time, so I'm not going to go through them. Aside from the first one, which is you better take my code as it is and automatically translate it, because I'm not doing it by hand, I'll make mistakes, okay? And the rest of them are similar. Anyway, with that, we're here. And
one question, and then we'll have a break.
You mentioned that the verification was in the non-preempt environment.
Yes, it was. Preemption was not something that their tools were prepared to handle. There's a lot more code and there's more complexity involved. But the fact that they could do it at all impressed me, and perhaps, go ahead.
How confident are you with preemptivity?
So confidence is an interesting word. It's an emotional state. I know there's bugs in there. Okay, I mean, another way of looking at it is how many lines of code are there, how good of a coder am I, how many bugs are there? And probably 30 or 40, okay, at least. It seems to be running reasonably well. And RCU is a weird thing. You can break it fairly viciously in certain ways and still have it not have symptoms. But I've actually kind of moved from being a incorrigible critic to formal verifications to thinking maybe it'll help me someday, maybe even with the preemptive part. It'd be really cool if it did. If you have tools that do verification, applying the Linux-kernel RCU would be a great way to prove your chops. You still have the opportunity to be the first person to find a bug in Linux-kernel RCU I didn't already know about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.